Welcome to Marketing Demystified, the podcast that connects the dots for business leaders to drive revenue through effective marketing strategy. We chat with marketing experts on different topics that will help you ramp up your revenue. We stream live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platforms. Marketing Demystified, the podcast, is presented to you by GrowGetter, your partner in growth marketing. And here's today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Are you ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered with actionable tips to transform your marketing game? You're in the right place. Welcome to Marketing Demystified. I'm your host, Jenn Mancusi, CEO and co-founder of GrowGetter, your growth marketing partner. Now, if you know me, you know I'm passionate about demand generation. My TikTok handle is literally DemandJenn, Jenn. That's a little shameless plug, but don't go follow me because I don't post there very often, but if you're so inclined. But that gives you a sense. Today's conversation is right in my wheelhouse. A few months ago, we spoke with Colin Spector, Senior VP of Global Sales at Orum, about sales and marketing alignment. He shared what sales really needs from marketing is qualified pipeline, not just leads. Today, we're going to hear from the other side of that partnership. Many B2B marketing teams are still focused on driving lead volume through gated content, event badge scans, similar tactics. But the problem is those leads don't convert. And the same approach that generates them isn't building the pipeline your sales team needs. So I'm joined by Sarah Reece, Director of Demand Generation at Orum, where she's led the shift from traditional lead generation to demand generation. Sarah's scaled go-to-market strategies at companies like Sourcegraph and Red Hat, and she believes that brand is the key to pipeline. I love that. Today, Sarah's breaking down what's wrong with traditional lead generation, what demand generation is, and what it looks like in practice. She'll also tell the full story of how she convinced leadership at Orum to make the switch and the results that followed. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Jen, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to chat.
I'm so excited to have this conversation. I'm such a big believer in demand generation and that evolution from lead gen to demand. And so I'm excited to hear your take on it as someone who has really transformed, I think, an organization from the inside out.
Absolutely. I think it's been a really awesome experience at Orum to have sales leadership and senior leadership that's so aligned to our shared outcomes and given me the latitude to prove out the brand as demand theory so that we can have the most efficient pipeline and revenue generation program across both marketing and sales.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of marketers and sales leaders out there probably who are looking for that same outcome. So we'll give them some tips today.
Yeah.
So let's start with the traditional concept of lead generation, using things like gated PDFs, webinar signups, event badge scans to just get as many leads as possible. Why does that approach no longer work, or did it ever really to begin with?
I think that's the best question. Did it ever actually work, right? I mean, I think most of us who have been in the demand gen space for years remember the days of running large-scale content syndication buys, really just trying to drive those MQLs. And the conversion rate, right, to qualified opportunities and pipeline was always something that was kind of dramatically low. And then if we're not just going to take quantitative data, but qualitative feedback, if you have a close relationship with your sales team, you probably have heard plenty of the grumblings about how those leads are, they're not qualified. And so I think lead generation fails because we're not identifying the hand raisers, the true hand raisers, right? The other thing that I feel like I learned pretty early on, I have a background, just so you know, not in marketing, but in philosophy, logic statements, right? And so if we can go buy a lead list, anybody remember the days of buying lead lists? If you can buy a lead list to artificially inflate your MQL number, why is that any different from running all of this gated content? And what barriers are you putting in front of your target audience to get them building that deeper relationship with your brand? So I feel like, traditional lead generation has always failed on a variety of fronts. It's not the most efficient way to get people to add to your database. It's going to burn bridges with your sales team because it's not qualified leads. It's, I think, where a lot of the tension in those relationships come from. And it's not creating a delightful prospect experience, because who wants to give over their name, social security number, and blood type to get an ebook and then know that they're going into this like multi-touch nurture and outreach sequence? So if we can just do away with our obsession with leads and focus on high intent hand raisers, we can really solve the problem of the business, which is generating pipeline and ultimately revenue.
Yeah. And I think that like that pressure has come from somewhere, right? I don't think marketers came in and said, we're going to get you as many leads as possible, right? Like there's so much pressure on marketing to deliver. And I think that tension of like the leads are poor quality, these are no good, it came from that pressure to deliver. You have to deliver a certain number of leads. But I think that definition of what a qualified lead is that is a thing that I'm very anti MQL. I hate the terminology of it. I'm anti SQL. I think marketing and sales need to have the same definition of a qualified lead, but everybody's definition, every business has such a different definition, and it's typically not coming from a place of sales and marketing alignment. Like, how do you define a qualified lead? And you're talking about high intent hand raisers. What's different about that versus a qualified lead?
Correct. Okay. So to talk you through how we do it at Orum, we all look at the same lead definition, and it's going to be a qualified stage 1 opportunity. So whether my lead is coming from a demo request or a free trial or a webinar, I'm looking entirely at, and I'm reporting out on, and I'm gold on that stage 1 opportunity. And then from there, we are also gold on stage 2 opportunities. So that would become a sales accepted opportunity, I think, in the common vernacular. And so the difference between the low intent leads are going to be people who are doing activities that don't necessarily demonstrate a desire to buy. These are activities like downloading content, registering for a webinar, coming to a booth. They're important. They're indicators of engagement with your business and your solution, but they're not indicators of appetite to buy. Appetite to buy is going to look like demo requests, free trials, pricing requests. If you need to gate pricing, we can debate that practice. It's not really a debate, is it? And so, like if we look at the marketing level, I kind of think about this as almost above the funnel is the low intent versus the high intent. And then we have that shared definition. I don't even report on those leads to the business. We flash them up because, of course, those are the inroads to get to an opportunity. But we're talking about a shared opportunity that's either marketing sourced through those channels, or it's going to be sales sourced either through SDR or AE outbound.
I think that's so important. And especially to what you just said, like, we're not anti-download, we're not anti-webinar. These are marketing activities, and they are an indicator of interest in the business, but they need to be nurtured. They are not. They have not indicated that they have any interest in buying. So that I think that is the difference between that high intent hand raiser and what typically is getting just marked as an MQL. I was having a conversation with someone just a week or two ago. Their MQL goals are very high. They have a very big number on their scorecard that they have to report to their CEO. And so their definition of a marketing qualified lead is very loose. Yeah. It's Gmail addresses of, that have downloaded a piece of content off social media. I'm like, that it's not, because the conversion rate is going to be very low. We haven't even identified if it's an ideal customer profile at that point. So, that those activities are not, those are marketing activities, and they should be measured and monitored and a step in the pipeline, in the funnel. But I love how you said, like, I don't even report those to the business.
Yes.
That's not the shared metric. The shared metric is the opportunity stages.
Right. Because then you get into this very pointless conversation with leadership or your sales counterparts that are around, oh, we need to do more webinars because I saw that webinar brought in 5,000 leads. And it's the wrong conversation. I think the way that I shifted this story for Orum is after a few quarters on the team, I was able to put up a really important slide, and it showed over an entire, I think it was a fiscal year. I was able to show over the fiscal year the volume of inbound high intent leads, those hand raisers, again, demo requests, free trials, pricing, versus the volume of our low intent leads, content, webinar, events. And then I was able to show the lead to opportunity conversion rate. And you were looking at, a 38% lead to opportunity conversion rate in the early days for high intent. And then you're looking at a 6.7% conversion rate for the low intent, where the volume was wildly different, right? Like you would see, let's call it 10,000 low intent leads, only 6% are converting. And then you have, 1,200 demo requests converting at a 38% conversion rate. I think it's a really easy business conversation to say, hey guys, let's focus on increasing our high intent leads. And we know brand is demand, right? All of these activities around content, webinars, event are brand building. They are building a relationship. And I'm going to do those things in service of driving demo requests. And so then the conversation becomes entirely about those opportunities, which are the majority is coming through the demo requests. So we're still using all of those tactics. We're just using them in service of driving more high intent, driving more opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about brand is demand. I love that phrasing. And like, what is exactly demand generation, and how does that elevate you to those high intent leads versus the low intent kind of content engagers that we were talking about?
Yeah. So when I think of demand generation, I break demand generation down into 3 jobs. We're creating the demand, which is the desire for your product or solution. We're capturing the demand, which is the conversion on our website. And we're accelerating demand, which are the things that we're doing while somebody is a pipeline opportunity to make sure that we're the vendor of choice and support sales and getting them through to close one. And so the demand creation piece is actually extremely important, because the stat that people are throwing around is 93 to 97% of your addressable market is not in a buying cycle at any given time. And so your job actually becomes to own the mind share, such that when they need, in the Orum case, to drive more pipeline over the phone, the first person they think of is Orum. And so we're doing that to surround the total addressable market the entire time, and really thinking about what that ecosystem looks like. And of course, it's digital, but it's also in-person experiences that we can then build an online ecosystem around, so that we're top of mind, we have the mind share. And then when they're ready to convert, when they're ready to solve that pain, there's 2 paths to get to us. They come to the website, which is how modern buyers buy, and they request a demo request. Or we're partnering really closely with our sales team during this entire demand creation program to make them feel supported in the outbound that they're doing to these accounts. And so then the goal is, when they get that person on the phone, they say, oh, I've been seeing you guys everywhere. Give me your pitch. What you got? And that is really like the capture piece is very much a partnership between marketing and sales, between inbound and outbound. And then the acceleration piece is a lot of the tactics that we're doing in demand creation are also tactics that we can use for acceleration. The same event where I'm going to create demand is also an event where I can invite somebody who's in pipeline to attend. They get to have more of that, in-person relationship with our team. People buy from people, and secure that vendor of choice spot and get us through to close one.
Mm. Yeah, those stages are really, I love the accelerate demand, because I do think that oftentimes marketing there's a handoff to sales, and then we're hands off. Correct. So that being a key kind of part of that demand cycle, I think, is really important. But the creating the demand, the brand side of things, I find that a lot of people don't have patience for it. So how do you answer the question, which I'm sure you get all the time? I get it constantly. How long is this going to take? So if you were to go back to, actually, I mean, I'd love to hear how about your kind of you getting started at Orum and getting into that business, but how do you convince people like this might take a little bit of time and it's okay, it's going to be worth it?
Yeah, I would honestly push back a little bit and say, I'm not sure that it's going to take as much time as we think if you get it right. And the way that we had an aha moment, we had a lightning in a bottle moment at Orum. And it was a few years ago, we rallied our resources and we secured funding to do our first big brand campaign. And when I say big brand campaign, I don't mean big in terms of buying billboards and things like that. I mean big in terms of having a dedicated swim lane to execute something that was purely brand. And that campaign was truly lightning in a bottle. It was, I can tell you a little bit about it. So the campaign was called Sell Yeah, a play on Hell Yeah.
Nice.
And it was a January campaign. And so the whole idea was knowing that being a sales development rep, being a sales development manager is a really, really, really hard job. But with Orum, cold calling can be a lot of fun. We have a sales floor that, you can get on with your team and hype each other up. And it's so adrenaline fueled. And like, what if we had this mindset shift from like, we have to sell to we get to sell? And like, my goal when I get a prospect on the phone is not even to book the meeting. It's just to be like the best part of their day. Let's just have a really good conversation with people. Again, people buy from people. And so we did this in the right timing, seasonality, that whole new year, new you mindset, growth mindset, timing, but then also something that like really spoke to the challenge and the opportunity of our audience. The branding, the creative was really good. It was really fun. And we ran this campaign. There was like a webinar component to it. So that would have been something that was capturing leads, but it was truly just about celebrating cold calling and trying to shift the mindset. And what we saw shortly after that campaign ran was a massive uptick in web traffic and conversion and pipeline. And, correlation is not causation, but it correlated very heavily to this visible, resonant brand moment. And so that was really the unlock for leadership to say, hey guys, this might not have been a dollar in, dollar out conversion program, but we can't deny the spike that we've seen in conversion on the site and pipeline creation. And then we watched it maintain. And then it will dip as some of the excitement goes down. And then we do something else really interesting to bring it up. And so having played this out over, at this point, 3 years, the correlation very much appears to be causation. And so I think that the understanding is there that it works.
I love that story. And I love that you're looking at the implied attribution where, it's not necessarily that somebody like clicked through an ad and immediately converted. That doesn't happen typically. And especially it shouldn't be expected to happen in a brand campaign. I'm curious about some of the channels that you use to reach people. Do you have a really solid database in place already? Are you using advertising? How are you going out to people to get that campaign in front of them on a digital in a digital way, but also get people into a webinar for those that are kind of struggling to fill those seats to begin with, before you even get to the website spike?
That's a great question. So when it comes to the promotion angle to get this campaign in front of people, we obviously have a great database. And so there's email marketing components to that. Our audience is living in LinkedIn. So there's very much a paid and organic social play going on. And then my recommendation, if you want to have a webinar program that's strong, is to get it off the ground with influencers or creators. Back then, Orum was very much in a brand building and also category building space. Cold calling was sort of the backwater of the sales organization. And my first job was actually to make cold calling happen. I think it's been successful given the competition is no longer just connect and sell. Lots of people are playing in the space now. And so in order to build that category and to build brand affinity and awareness, we worked with a lot of influencers, creators, people who had their own media platforms. And so that is a great way for us to use their audiences and bring them into our space. A lot of people, a lot of brands will sponsor their things, right? And I think that one of my little hacks would be to have them come participate in your things so that you own the database, you own the traffic.
That's a great tip. I love that. I think a lot of people think about influencer marketing in more of a B2C way, but there's a lot of people on LinkedIn influencers that are, if you can get them, that would be a great way to get a bigger audience for sure.
Absolutely.
It's great. So if demand generation is about kind of building trust and creating that demand before you capture it, what does the capturing kind of look like? What are some of the, I mean, you talked through a live example, but what are some of the tactics that make up that creation and then capture strategy? Is it really just demos on the site?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, prior to being at Orum, I was in very technical developer marketing and IT, CISO, CIO, CTO type marketing. And so I want to acknowledge first and foremost the privilege that I have in marketing towards the sales persona. I think that it can be very hard for people who are in more niche or challenging industries to hear some of my examples and be like, easy for you to say, my people aren't hanging out on LinkedIn. I have to go hang out in Twitch and Discord. And I just want to acknowledge that that is a challenge.
Yeah.
That is a challenge, and I am privileged and I love being here. But yeah, I mean, tactically, you need to understand their watering holes. I think the strategy itself applies to everyone. It's their watering holes. Where are they? And how can you show up in those spaces in a way that provides value? Because by providing value, being relatable, making them feel seen, you're building that brand awareness, you're building that brand affinity and positive perception that is creating demand. It's creating demand to be associated with your brand, and it's creating demand for your solution because they trust you and feel like you can help them. So in my audience, that's going to look a lot like LinkedIn. We can take it even higher up funnel if we want to do things like connected TV. LinkedIn has a very, very, very efficient and effective connected TV solution that you can target to, all of your firmographic, your persona, your company levels. So you can make the business feel comfortable that you're targeting the target account list. And you're doing it in a way that feels very branded, and it's very accessible, like from a cost perspective, I would say. But also, things like podcast ads, those are things that I would even put into a demand creation tactic bundle. And tracking the effectiveness of those, we use an attribution tool. We use Dream Data. Some of these things are trackable. Some of them aren't. Podcasts are a little tricky, but we understand where our audience over indexes, and that's a great way to get in front of them. And then when it comes to capture, it's making the website experience as frictionless as possible to get them to where they want to go. For us, it's demo requests. We are going up market. So as we're thinking enterprise, I think that those conversions look different. We're experimenting with the idea of discovery sessions or strategy sessions that are more tailored to somebody who's not necessarily interested in demoing the tool, but understanding how to integrate our solution into their outbound practice, which is a little bit more aligned with what the enterprise buyer is thinking about. And a really important piece here that I think I'm really glad you had Colin on a few weeks ago or months ago is the connection between marketing and sales, because that SAO goal that I'm tied to is dependent entirely on a practice that I do not manage, which is the follow-up. All of the follow-up is done by either a sales development rep or an AE at Orum, which means I need to be very tightly aligned with RevOps to ensure that lead routing is seamless. I need to be very tightly aligned with the leaders who are building out our outreach sequences. And I need to be very tightly aligned with the managers who are managing rep follow-up to make sure that my stage one opportunities are actually getting followed up on. We have a bit of a luxury here at Orum where we drive more marketing leads than our sales team can follow up on in some cases. And so working with those managers as well as the RevOps team to get speed to lead and the operational rigor of pulling them through the funnel is a very important part of capture that I don't necessarily know that people spend a lot of time thinking about. But if you're held to a goal that you don't actually own operationalizing, I think you have to be in those weeds.
Yeah, that's such an important piece, because I think there's also that, like, when marketing is setting up or delivering a qualified lead, I love that you're like delivering more than can be followed up on. That is something to be massively proud of. Good problems to have, but there is a space in between that, even that high intent hand raiser and the meeting that happens, right? And so who's filling that space? And I think a lot of people struggle with that. Like, marketing is not always booking meetings. Maybe there are some paths in which, that hand raiser has booked a meeting via a marketing, path. But most of the time there is that follow-up that needs to happen. And I love you mentioned this way in the beginning, and Colin and I spoke about this a few months ago, this concept of having shared goals, because not only are you being sort of tracked and you've got a success metric that you don't own, like you mentioned, but the people that do own it are sharing in that same success metric. It doesn't work if you don't have shared goals. But if everybody's working towards the same objective, then you can collaborate and work together on achieving those goals, as opposed to, I think, if marketing is working on improving email open rates and sales is trying to close deals, you're not aligned on what your primary goals are, unfortunately. And I'm not saying those metrics are not important, and I want to talk about metrics in a second, but like that one kind of shared success, or two, whatever it might be, is so critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, one of, not to paint us in too good of a light, but like we like, there is conflict in between marketing and sales, right? We drive a ton of leads, more than they can follow up on. And so the desire is always going to be for those higher seat count deals. So we're constantly working together to say, okay, well, these qualify, but they're going to be a lower seat count. How can we help you guys surface the bigger seat counts? The rep feedback, it's a privilege that the rep feedback isn't, these leads are garbage. It's more like, this is only a 9-seater and I want a 25-seater. It's like, but when time is limited, they really are trying to find the biggest needles in the haystack, I guess. And so those are the types of conversations that we are in the weeds of how do we surface the highest quality ones? How do the reps like work the deal hard enough to identify if there are more seats? It's very, like, a lot of what we do is actually pretty bottom of funnel, stepping into the sales development place. I've even had the privilege of getting to manage our sales development team while our sales development leader was out, which for me as a marketer was such a great eye-opening place for me to even deepen my understanding of the practice so that we can deliver better leads and support the team.
I do think like every marketer should manage like a business development or a sales development team at some point in their career. Like, I did the same. I was a marketer my whole career, and then I took over a business development team and eventually became CRO at the business, and took over the entire sales and marketing organization. And what a difference, right? I think you run sales differently when you have a really good understanding of marketing. You run marketing differently when you have a really good understanding of sales. And I just think everybody should have that cross-functional experience, especially in teams that need to be like working as a team.
Yeah, as a leader, I prickle because I'm like, oh, my poor SDRs. If you get the wrong marketing manager, like, SDRs need management. So I think you have to find the right marketer. But at the very least, I think every marketer needs to go through sales onboarding, like whatever your sales boot camp looks like. I think they need to be shadowing AEs and SDRs. At Orum, we have a sales floor. And so our team is encouraged heavily to spend time on the sales floor while the reps are dialing, so they can hear not only real-time feedback from the prospects in terms of what messaging is landing, if they're following up on marketing leads, like did they remember us from the event, or did they just come by to grab swag? Like, you can learn so much about how to make marketing better, but you also just really get to bond with the team and understand how their job is done. And for me as a marketer, I call it my favorite reality TV show, because there's just nothing like the thrill of watching somebody like beat through objections and then get the meeting. It's a
Ring the
blast.
bell.
Yes. Yes.
Amazing. So let's talk a little bit about the metrics. So what are the types of, like, I'm big on finding the metrics that matter, because
Right.
fortunately or unfortunately, there's a million things that we can track in marketing and in sales, but there's only typically a few that actually matter. So what you talked about using dream data, but maybe the tools don't even matter as much as, like, what are the metrics that matter? And if you're not really counting like the old total leads or MQLs or whatever, like, what are the things that you are tracking? And maybe too, like a part B to the question, what are the metrics that marketing cares about to do your job better versus what are the metrics that the business cares about that marketing is communicating out?
Very, very, very important distinction. So when it comes to our primary reporting, what we look at every single week in the pipeline interlock across the business is the exact same thing that sales is looking at. The marketing is just another team on the list of sales teams that are bringing in opportunities, qualifying those opportunities, and having close won deals and the conversion rate between those. So that's what we report out at the business level. So stage 0, stage 1 opportunities, conversion rate to stage 2, sales accepted opportunities, conversion rate to close won, pipeline value, ACV by segment. That's our Bible. That's what we're looking at every week. When we want to dig deeper, right? So like, I'm looking at week over week and my inbound opportunities are lower. It's not as easy as add new prospects, get them into sequence, make dials. There's so many things that go into what drives marketing inbound. And so then we double click into the different sources of conversion. For us, primarily, it's going to be the website as the place where people are converting. So then we're looking into traffic into the website and following those threads back. We have deep dives that the marketing team is paying attention to for optimizing our tactics, right? So every tactic does have to be optimized. I'm looking at, I think for a while, like, we were all bashing on things like reach and frequency and, CPM and things like that. But those are very important metrics for the person who's running a paid media program to be aware of. And we're constantly looking at the efficiency of reach and frequency compared with the efficiency of cost per click, and where are we willing to spend more to reach a better audience to have a more qualified conversion, and monitoring that over time. When it comes to events, we're always looking at those event conversion rates in terms of registered to attended. Another thing that we're working on with events right now, because it is a big portion of our spend, is this new metric. I don't think I invented it, but I've never seen anybody use it before, which is pipeline in the room. So like I said in the beginning, create, capture, accelerate demand. Events have always been really tricky because they do all of the things. And so often we want to look at them solely as an opportunity creation channel, which they're just not an efficient opportunity creation channel. Events are wildly inefficient. And so the cost per opportunity from an event is going to be insane compared to the cost per opportunity from paid search or paid social conversion. So what I'm looking at is the idea that events are creating demand because you're getting in front of a net new audience in a very impactful, very human way. Sure, you're going to be capturing opportunities. And then we're also bringing in customers and open pipeline to these events to continue to build that affinity, deepen the relationship, and move them into close won. So when I'm talking to the business now, I'm looking at total pipeline in the room. And I calculate that based on new prospects and what their ACV would be based on their segment. I'm looking at actual customer revenue, and then I'm looking at the pipeline value of the prospect accounts that are in the room. And so that means at the end of an event, I can come back to them and I can say, hey, we sourced 5 opportunities from this event, and we touched $1.7 million worth of pipeline. And then in 30, 60, 90 days, as we do our attribution look back, I can also start reporting on things like influenced opportunities and influenced revenue, which is the probably outside of pipeline metrics that we share with sales and reporting, channel specific optimization metrics. The third piece would be the attribution, where we're looking at influence in the larger buying cycle, using tools like Dream Data.
Yeah, that's a really interesting approach. This is how much pipeline we touched in the event. I think it's something really valuable that maybe if you don't point it out specifically, nobody would, because there's always this. I mean, this is my critique of marketing campaigns in general, is that I think the ones that fail are because you're measuring the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the case of an event, you could be saying like, oh, this event is for new pipeline. But if you've got all customers in the room, then you're going to fail. But maybe that was a very successful event, right? From a customer engagement perspective. So I love that, like, kind of thinking about how much pipeline was touched or how much active customer revenue was touched in that event, alongside new opportunities and new pipeline creation, is such a great way to kind of understand, well, what was the overall value of this event? Or to say, here's an event that is purely for new business acquisition, and here's an event that is purely for customer retention, and measure it accordingly.
Yes. And I think it allows, this is a new to us metric. We're just starting to write it down and then ask questions about it. So for example, we use this for a big market takeover we did in London a few weeks ago. And so I pull out, total pipeline touched by the event, and I have it divided based on existing business, which are customers, and then, new business, potential business, which would be prospects and open pipeline. And looking at the weighting allows me to say, it was kind of 50-50 customers, net new prospects. Was that a problem? Is that because the customers in the room were our best customers? And so when I look at the revenue number, or like the pipeline money number, it's higher because these are really big deals, really big seats. And so this looks disproportionate. It's a higher volume of accounts, but it's a lower overall price point for the business. So we're still figuring out what to do with this metric, but I think it's just a really nice way to capture in real time the breadth of an event and help to tune the mindset of leadership or people who may be outside of the execution, who still have that old way of thinking that it's events equal net new opportunities, when that's really a much more complex practice that gets heavily scrutinized because of the cost.
Yeah. And so you talk about that mindset shift of like thinking about the results a little differently. You maybe touched on this a little bit, this split funnel kind of methodology to prove that a demand gen approach works better than a lead gen approach. Can you just talk through that in a little more detail, so that somebody is out there listening and trying to convince their leadership that this is the shift that they need to make in their organization? Like, what's the right data? How do you use that to convince leadership, and then, and get buy-in?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, again, another place where I think I set myself up for success here was in the interview process with Orum. I always joke that I'm surprised they hired me, because the way that I really grilled sales leadership, so our CEO, Jason, as well as our SVP of sales, Colin, in the interview process, because I really wanted to make sure that I didn't find myself in another organization that was going to be holding me down when the quarter is feeling challenging and ask me where their leads were. I needed to make sure that they were philosophically aligned in the primary goal of my function. And so I remember saying to Colin, I just really want you to understand what I think success looks like for me. And I think the most successful thing that I could do is when your team is making outbound calls, the other person on the end of the line is saying, Orum, seen you guys everywhere. Love what you're doing. Sure. I'll give you 15 seconds. Give me the pitch. Because if I can facilitate that interaction, everything is gravy for our sales team. They just need to get in to get the pitch, and then they're going to book the meeting. I mean, I believe in them. And so when Colin was like, yes, exactly, that's when I knew that this would be a place where I felt like I could succeed as a demand leader. Mm-hmm. And when I started out at Orum, the marketing team was a team of 2. The majority of our revenue was outbound. And when I say the majority, I mean like 98% of it was outbound. And so I did want to experiment, this being a new market for me, previously more in the developer space. So we did run a mix of traditional lead gen tactics. Let's get some points on the board, So we ran those webinars, we ran those events, we gated our content. We did all of those things to create leads. And of course, we know that those are brand building activities as well as lead generating activities. And then we're also optimizing our website for conversion. And so over time, like I said, I was able to report out on, at the end of a period, the overall volume of high intent versus low intent leads, as well as the conversion rate to late stage opportunity, and put that on a slide. And I think that data really allowed leadership to let go of their fear when I told them I was going to be optimizing towards that demo request versus optimizing towards the lead capture. And I actually have on LinkedIn, like one of my pinned posts is the actual slide that I used, because I think that it is really hard for demand marketers to convince leaders to trust the process, because you have your for sure thing, which is these leads that are going to convert at maybe a 6% conversion rate if you're lucky. And so to let go of those and not even let go of them in terms of creating them, but like to let go of your focus there so that you can focus on those demo requests, which are going to have, now our demo request opportunity conversion rate is above 40%. It's close to 50% at times, because we've optimized not only the demand creation, but we've been able to use our efforts to optimize demand capture as well, including the conversion through sales. And so I think that data that can show them why it's a better bet to vet on the demo requests or whatever your version of a high intent lead source would look like is the rational explanation they need to make the shift.
Yeah. You said something that I think is really interesting. That's like, things like downloads, webinars, events, those are brand building activities. Yeah. So I think when some people, maybe non-marketers or whatever, when people think about brand, let's invest in building brand, they think of your headline and your positioning and the look and feel. And those are all part of brand for sure. But sometimes that feels a little soft and fluffy and like, well, how is that? How is getting the positioning right going to increase our pipeline? That's a whole nother probably podcast episode about how it will, trust me. but that's not all it is, right? And this concept of like kind of shifting from lead gen to demand gen, it's about moving those things that were lead generation activities. Those are brand building activities, and let's treat them as such. Let's think of them as brand building activities. And that demand capture is that high intent hand raiser. I love that distinction, and kind of just moving events and downloads and whatever from lead gen to brand. It's not that we're not doing those things. It's not that those things don't work. They have a different purpose. Right. And so be clear about why you're doing them: to build brand, to build trust and credibility and add value, and, move people through a journey before they get to sales. Yes. I think that's really powerful, and just like another way to think about the shift, because, it's not that you don't want a lead magnet. Maybe you do want a lead magnet. Maybe it's, maybe it is an efficient way for you to get people's email addresses into your system. I think there's probably other ways, but maybe that works really well. Or maybe there is a download piece that you give away for free to the people in your database. And it's not a bad marketing tactic. It's just not going to drive revenue.
Right. We optimize those for engagement, right? And engagement can look like a variety of things. If you're choosing to ungate your content, Then you can track things like blind form submits to know that people have engaged with it, they've read it. Now you pull that audience into a retargeting pool where you're surrounding them with deeper messaging, keeping yourself top of mind, because again, only 3 to 5% of your audience is actually looking for a solution to a problem at any given time. And so we need to be surrounding that 93 to 97% of people with things that they're going to engage with, that build affinity, that position you as a thought leader that's respected in the space, that's giving competitive differentiation. I mean, these are all really important things that are happening with the messaging and positioning, as well as the things that you're talking about and how you show up. But we're optimizing those for engagement, not for pipeline. And that's the difference in the mindset that I think really helps us be more effective.
Yeah, I love that. It was such a good sort of aha in how you just thinking about these tactics a little bit differently. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been such a fun conversation. I love talking to marketers who are, kind of taking this approach and really focusing on driving pipeline and revenue as opposed to driving, maybe or succumbing to the pressure to drive leads. I won't put the blame on other marketers. There is a lot of pressure to deliver, and so kudos to you for kind of shifting mindsets internally, which is not easy. And thank you so much for sharing all your secrets and how you've done it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jen. It's always a pleasure to be able to talk about this. I want to support the demand marketers who are in situations where they know it's the right thing to do, but they can't do it. So if my story and my examples can support somebody, that is a moment well spent for me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for listening in. Make sure you're following Sarah on LinkedIn to hear more about her expertise. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to Marketing Demystified wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time for more conversations that help demystify the complex world of marketing. We'll see you then.